All right, we're live.
Check, 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 check.
I'm going to click this link just to make sure that we are indeed live. And it looks like we
I'm
are.
gonna open this whiskey.
All right, so let's introduce ourselves. I'm Thomas the Bear. Anyone who remembers me, I'm sure you. I don't even know where we're starting out with, but I kind of disappeared for maybe 4 or 5 months, right? And those of you that used to listen to me probably wondered where I went. Well, nonetheless, I'm back.
Shapeshifter.
Yeah. So Jamie's also from the same community that I used to be in, and we've decided to kind of start up I don't know, is this a weekly or bi-weekly show?
Who knows? Let's just see how it goes.
Yeah, we're just kind of bullshitting.
We just have a laugh, just look at things and have a couple of whiskeys. I think that's it, and we'll see how it expands over time.
Yeah, so Jamie and I met back in December 2018 in London. Jamie's from England.
Is that when it was?
I think so, right? It was December 2018.
Man, that's ages ago. Wow.
Yeah, that was back when you could fly across the world and not worry about contracting coronavirus. But we'll get into that.
That's it.
All right. So, Do you want to introduce yourself?
How long did that take? 1 minute 38 in order for that to come in.
And just to clarify, sorry. Go ahead.
Nah, no worries, man. Yeah. Jamie, basically. I usually do some fundamentals. And for once, I'm just gonna have a few beers and chill. I mean, this has been a long waited. We should have done this ages ago, to be fair. It's nice to have like the informal input on it. Let's just chat for an hour. What we're basically thinking, just travel on and see what people think. But yeah, sounds good, man. All good.
Yes. Cool. So this is like the first installment. We're going to be talking everything from markets, equity markets, crypto, what's going on with the coronavirus, and just generally BSing about what we see taking place in the market. This is a financial kind of discussion, and just want to make sure that we clarify that it's not, financial advice and all that other crap that you have to give disclaimer wise, but, consult your financial advisor and anyone else who's actually a professional, unlike us, before making any investment, making any investments from what we talk about here. I think
don't take any advice from people who are drinking whiskey or tea. Just messing around. That goes without saying. I shouldn't be in a disclaimer.
Yeah, so you're drinking whiskey and I've got tea, because for you it's 7 o'clock in the evening and for me it's 2 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
Yeah, so
it just seems right. It's a great excuse to be able to have a drink midweek. Like, I've got a chat on Skype for a bit. StreamYard. So it's a great excuse. We'll see how things go on. But I could see. I mean, look at what have we got there. You start with the apocalypse page.
Yeah, I guess we should start. Let's definitely start out with that. Let's start out with the coronavirus and transition from what's going on with that to how that's going to affect markets and any potential ideas that we've kind of been tossing around to play in the market, since this seems to be a bit more serious than we thought last week. I actually went to medical school for a year before transitioning out, and I ended up getting a master's in medical science. So I have a bit of a background in this stuff. I'm not a professional by any means, but it's certainly been fascinating to me, because when I was a kid, the first movie I watched was Outbreak with Dennis Hoffman. And I'm pretty sure that was a movie about Marburg. So I was so young when I watched this movie, but I basically wanted to get into studying infectious disease when I was really young. And I watched this movie, and I think it's about Marburg or one of the other hemorrhagic fever viruses. I don't think it's Ebola, but nonetheless, I watched this movie, And I remember seeing Dustin Hoffman and all the other supporting doctors with those biohazmat suits. And I realized I never want to do that. You know, if my suit rips, I'm fucked. So I crossed that off the list of things that I would potentially go into because I was too afraid to be an infectious disease doctor. But that's kind of what I grew up being really fascinated with. But nonetheless, I mean, it seems like from what I gather is this is probably one of the more, I mean, it seems like it's one of the most contagious viruses that we've seen lately, originating in Wuhan. There's a couple of conspiracy theories that have been circulating around about it, including that. I don't know if you read any of these about the Canadian Level 4 laboratory that these Chinese scientists sent over to China, and they basically stole these samples. Did you read about that?
I've heard shitloads of conspiracies over the last week, and that has not cropped up. I mean, I've heard of like the biowarfare program that they have in Wuhan. Whether that's even true, you just don't know. I mean, you've got to take everything with a pinch of salt. I mean, the only thing that I've been doing is looking at epidemiological and clinical, basically, trials and documents that have been coming out over the past week to just try and get some sort of grasp about the virus, because even they don't know what's going on yet. So, I mean, until everyone gets a true understanding of it all, I mean, if I share my screen, how do I share my screen?
I have to click here. Oop. There you go. Can I still hear you? I think you got muted, or I got muted. Shit. I can see your screen, but I can't hear you anymore. You still there? Okay, I'm not hearing you. Let's first show hiccups. Can you hear me, Jamie? You can hear me, but I can't seem to hear you.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Oh, there you go.
Hello?
Yeah, what happened there?
I have no idea. Nothing happened on this end, I don't think. I don't think I pressed a button. I'm not that far gone yet. Give me a couple more whisks and we'll see. But yeah, so did you hear anything? So I mean, as I was saying, like, it's difficult with the amount of, the problem is now is like so much media and clickbait now that it's just impossible to take what's serious and what's not. So my other half has basically been sending me places where you should really look for proper research documents. So this is probably one of the most, basically it's done by Lancet. So if people don't know, can I put that? I can put the link in. So the Lancet.com is basically one of the most important, I'll put the link in the chat. It's basically one of the most important ones you can have a look at. How do I put the comments in? So yeah, so I mean, this one here is basically talking about 99 patients. That was, I'll quickly give it a read. So it was basically 99 patients from I think it was over most of January. And then it basically talked about the epidemiological aspects of the patients over time. So you had 49% had a history of exposure to the human seafood market. And then basically they started looking at basically how they got on over time. So these are the main figures that they got from the 99 patients of basically the symptoms they had, what ages they were, etc. So, I mean, so chronic illnesses, you had cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases. Can't even read my own language. 40%. Digestive system disease, 11%. Malignant tumor, 1%. So basically, the most important thing there, personally, for me, was the amount that had to be admission to the intensive care unit. So the intensive care unit, you don't have many beds for that. So in hospitals usually you don't have many beds. So it says there that 23% were actually admitted to ICU. So that's quite a high amount, personally, I think, from what was basically done. So I mean, their findings were, I mean, you would know this. I haven't got a clue if you know what unilateral pneumonia is compared to bilateral pneumonia,
Yeah.
and
So
then multiple mottling and ground glass opacity. So that unilateral was 25%, bilateral was 75%, and 14% was the multiple mottling.
yeah, it's not good. I mean, it seems like there seems to be a disconnect, at least as far as the data that we're getting out of China and some of the publications that are putting out. Of course, the media is run over there by the government, and a lot of things are filtered out. But yeah, bilateral pneumonia is both lungs, and unilateral is just one side. And whenever you have both involved, it gets more serious. And you can see here on Jamie's screen, or I guess I'll put mine up here, but using Jamie's link, this was basically summarizing what, where is it? So I wanted to, oh, here it is. So the treatments that they were used, 76% of the patients had to have oxygen therapy. So when you have pneumonia, it's going to make it really difficult to breathe. A lot of your lungs are going to be filled with fluid. Therefore, the oxygen saturation in the blood's going to go down. So you're going to need to be on a respirator or at least have oxygen. I think a respirator is probably a bit too far, but nonetheless, I mean, that's a staggering statistic. 3/4 of patients that are admitted are going to need to be on oxygen therapy. I mean, the problem here is basically you've got a contagious virus that kind of skipped the animal to human stage, where, for instance, like swine flu and SARS, they had to go from animal to human, and then humans had to transmit it to each other without having to get infected initially by the animal. Now, human-to-human transmission is a much more difficult step to take in this whole process, and somehow this virus managed to acquire the ability to easily transmit from human to human. And it seems to be extremely, extremely contagious. And right now, the mortality rate is relatively low, but I think that it's underreported, and we could potentially see things like that accelerate higher. And therefore, governments would have to take more aggressive actions to quarantine or even shut down borders. But let's see, where is the statistic? Yeah, so, it's 170 total deaths. I think the estimate is there's probably 1,200 patients that are critically ill. And, this is just getting started here. But I don't know how much more we should talk about the specifics of the biology of the virus, and probably move toward the impact that we could have here, economically speaking. I mean, you and I were talking about. Go ahead.
I suppose the main message is just keep off Twitter. Just if you're gonna try and research anything about it, just get it from a legitimate source at least, because otherwise you'll just end up getting knee deep in nonsense. So.
Yeah, like don't
especially
follow
like,
me.
If you're gonna take some trades because of it, like, yeah, I mean Thomas, yeah, never follow Thomas. The amount of stuff he comes out with, I mean, it's not even. Look at that, it's not even 2 microns.
Yeah. So I made this.
You're right.
We were talking about what masks to buy before we went live here, and I bought these things on Amazon, and these are P100 masks, so they're supposed to filter out basically 99.7% of all particulate. The issue here is the coronavirus is like between 0.1 and 0.2 microns in diameter, and these masks are only good at filtering out things larger than 0.3 microns, and it's really hard to find any one of these masks that'll actually 100% filter out the coronavirus. So if somebody sneezes in your face, you're kind of screwed if you're wearing one of these masks. And even more so, the people that are wearing the N95s and those paper masks that you see a lot of people in China wearing, those are really only effective at preventing themselves from infecting other people with the virus. So in some ways it's good, and other ways it's not really doing what everybody hopes it to do. And moreover, you have to cover your eyes too. So if you really want to cover all your bases, you got to wear like a scuba mask and have a mask, and of course this
Scuba
respirator.
man.
No, seriously, you got to cover your eyes.
I know. No, I got some goggles as well, but I mean, I can just imagine everybody there with just, with just dressed as scuba divers, just walking around to the shop.
I mean, I'm flying tomorrow, and I got to figure out if I'm wearing this thing to the airport or not. And I'm kind of,
Yeah.
on
suppose-
one hand, I'm probably not going to wear it.
I mean, yeah, no, you should wear it anyway. I'd wear it. I mean, to be honest, apparently a lot of people in airports now, you're starting to see a lot of people wear them. I suppose it depends where you're going, so it depends on the people who are on the plane. But I mean, for the moment, it's so early, especially like, I mean, how many cases? You've got 5 cases in the US.
Yeah.
I mean, how fast is the US? So, I mean, here we haven't got a confirmed case yet, so it's early days, and who knows what will happen. But I think it's always good to take precaution just in case. I mean, you just see the Philippines. So the Philippines have had 1 confirmed case, and you've just got people queuing up outside pharmacies, which is a bit crazy, to be honest. So,
It is.
Just shows what the media can get to now.
What's crazy about I think the most dangerous part about this virus is essentially it takes about 2 to 14 days to show symptoms. The biggest problem with the virus is that you are infectious even if you're showing no symptoms. So you and I could have this virus right now, have no idea that we do, be coughing and sneezing around random people and spreading the virus without even knowing it. And I think that's the biggest risk that we're dealing with right now, is these sort of sleeper people that are running around spreading this thing without knowing it. And that's really very rare for a virus to be able to do. I mean, most of the time you're not going to be infectious until you're coughing, sneezing, and feeling like shit. But there was this case of a kid, like a 10-year-old boy, and I forget which country he had gone to, but the parents basically urged him to get him tested because both parents were sick, and they tested positive for coronavirus, but the kid didn't have any symptoms after 2 weeks, and they tested him and he was positive for it, and he felt fine. So that's one of the big problems here is that.
Yeah, I think they haven't 100% confirmed that it's transmissible during the incubation phase. So who knows? It could be, might not be, but main thing is, what will that do to the markets?
Yeah, let's get into that. So you had a cool idea.
That's why we're here.
Yeah,
let's get a little bit positive. So issues, everything. Yeah. So I mean, for me personally, I've been looking at different things. So whether it's, shall I have a look? Should we go on here? So, yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of things that I've been looking at. I mean, for me personally, I've been looking at stocks that basically have a lot of revenue or are intertwined now with the China. So there's lots of different ones you can take. I mean, there's thousands that you can have a look at. I mean, there's MC. So MC is obviously high. I mean, actually, I can't go on there. Yeah, go on there. So MC are a very, they're a high, very luxurious brands and goods. So if this company in the long term, if we're looking from a long-term perspective, their growth is going to come out of China. There's no doubt in that. Chinese are very similar to Russians. They love a lot of things. I mean, I've got friends who work in high-end shops, and they'll walk into a shop sometimes and they'll say, what's the thing that's selling the most? And then they'll just buy it. Even if they don't like it, they'll just buy it. So, there's a lot of different things going on. LVMH is obviously one. The ticker LVMH is for the US, or it's MC, which is for the Euro stocks. So it's quite an interesting one. So about 29% of their revenue basically comes out. 29% of the revenues comes through China. So the one thing for me personally, I mean, I've got a few longs on, so I want to be covering them. So over the past couple of weeks, the past week, I've been looking for stocks to cover just for the short term until this basically settles down. And so I was looking at LVMH. Yeah, as I said, 29% revenue. If things get as bad as they are in Wuhan and other cities, then you can bet your bottom dollar that no one's going to be going outside and no one's going to be spending money. So if that does happen, I mean, so for example, if we compare it to, I think it was SARS. So in SARS, I think it was 1 month, and that actually affected their GDP in that month by 1%. So, if this ends up going on for a lot longer than SARS, then it can affect, I mean, if we're looking from a massive top-down perspective, for me, which is the most important thing, is that now, people have been saying that, we've hit a trough, we're going to keep on carrying on in the cycle. And people were basically looking at China and saying, okay, trade deal's done. If China now starts growing again, now that they've done the trade deal, that will then have an effect on Europe, which will then kickstart things at least quite a few percentage base points for Europe as well to grow back. With this happening, that puts a massive dent and question mark on it, because obviously, one, it's really early, so we don't know what's going to happen. But at the moment, we've got to be cautious of how long this thing can go on for. So, yeah, I mean, I've been looking at different things that could affect the Chinese, that could affect basically the revenue of companies, especially companies as well, being this late in the cycle. I don't know if you've looked at some of the PE ratios, but some of the PE ratios are just mental now. So, I mean, LVMH have a PE ratio of the last 12 months. I think it's something like 25, 26. And I mean, the median for that sector, you're looking at around 15. So 15 to, well, it's around 13 to 15. So, I mean, you're not far off from double of what the actual average is for that industry. So for me, it makes sense just to, if things do get bad over there, then at least I'm hedged and I don't need to worry. I can sleep at night and not worry that if, the SPY ends up correcting itself, because it has had a good run. And for me personally, a couple of weeks ago, before this actually came out in China, a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking, yeah, I'll just, stay with some longs for now, have one or two shorts, and that's it. And now, as soon as this has popped out, it's just like, well, okay, looks like this is a catalyst at least to have a good correction. So I think it's always good to be safe. I don't know about you, but yeah, so that's one I was looking at. I think it's a good case at least.
So how
just
are
to
you
hedge a little bit.
sizing your portfolio? Like if you're hedging with these companies, like you own exposure on the SPY, or where's the most of your exposure long wise?
Long wise, and so from the end of last year to this year, I've transferred it a little bit. So obviously the year in the SPY was really good. 2019, great year, lovely jubbly. But I think it's gone very, very far. I mean, the rest of the world last year was struggling. So I actually started to divert. So I started having 50% in the US and I started having 50% in Europe. Well, I was slowly transferring to Europe a little bit more, going into about half and half, because my view was that Europe will probably outperform the SPY simply because it's just gone so far, the SPY. And I think Europe is going to be more underestimated for 2020 compared to the US. So yeah, but then obviously after this happening, you have to think about things as things happen. You've got to change and move with the markets as you see in things, or whatever goes on. So, I mean, yeah, for me, now I've still got a couple of longs in the UK, and I'll keep it at that for now, unless things change. But I've hedged them at least against basically ones that have revenue, at least a good amount of revenue in China, because I mean they're the ones that are going to get hit the hardest at the end of the day if things do correct. I mean the SPY is staying so strong, it's madness. But yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I think yeah, I mean there's a couple of others. I mean you could easily look at Apple as well and try and look for a trade there. I mean they've got factories actually that produce mobiles in Wuhan. So I mean there's so many different companies now, because I think people forget how dependent we are on China, especially from a manufacturing perspective. So, see how things go, hedge. And then the main thing is, as long as you hedge, then you should be fine. I mean, I think that's the most important thing in this game, is you end up losing more money when you're too far ahead of one. Like you're too many long positions or too many short positions and the market goes the other way. So you've always got to be nimble and you've always got to be hedged somewhat.
It seems like people are always looking for a reason to short, right? I mean, in December we had the repo market crisis, September it started, and then there was a paper that came out in December from a Credit Suisse guy named Zoltan Pozar, who evidently was the guy who understood the whole plumbing of everything. And he basically came out and said, well, this thing's about to implode imminently and we're going to see the markets crash. And of course we didn't. And the SPY continued, the whole market really just catapulted higher.
Just kept on going. Yeah.
And I mean, like,
it's been crazy, yeah.
It has. And the question is, what's going to bring this thing down? And I think that the markets are extremely stubborn at this point, and they something like a pandemic should theoretically have an impact on a lot of these markets. But I mean, the question remains, can this thing really impact GDP over the course of a year? And I think it can. And it seems like it's being downplayed by the market. So I think there's still a lot of opportunities. And specifically, the most obvious ones to me are things like the airline stocks. I mean, United's already taken a big hit here. British Airways.
I was so pissed. I put a short on CEA, which is Chinese Eastern Airlines. And then the SEC pulled all the sales and then banned the sales for 2 days.
What did they do?
So I was gutted. So the SEC stopped short selling for 2 days.
Okay, so it's like circuit breakers almost.
Yeah. So, but I mean, yeah, exactly. I think you're completely right. The main thing is all depends on how long it goes on for. So one way to look at it, I mean, personally, I think the one way you can look at it is looking at historical patterns when there were previous viruses. So it seems that looking at historical data, usually from a percentage perspective, the amount of cases starts to drop quite dramatically is usually when you get a very violent V-bottom basically in the markets, if you look at previous viruses. So that is one thing I'd probably encourage people to look at. And then basically once things seem to have got under control and the virus isn't spreading as much, it seems that you start to get a bounce. So little things like that I'll be looking at. But for the moment, as you say, it's early days. So just stay hedged and just stay rational, I think, at the end of the day. It's always good to be hedged.
So here's a statistic for the last, viruses that have broken out and what's happened over 6 months versus 12 months in the S&P. And you've got,
that's interesting.
I mean, the main ones to really look at, I think, are, Ebola didn't really impact the United States or really much of the world, just kind of a couple places in Africa. And
how did swine flu get on?
Yeah, so here's swine flu. So this was positive. I mean, everything's positive, it seems like. I mean, look, we're looking.
When was swine flu?
Right.
Swine flu was 2009, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so we're not seeing big changes by these viruses, right? It seems like the market shrugs them off and continues moving. I mean,
yeah. You seem to get a couple of corrections, like depending on how long it goes on for, but you usually get a 1 or 2 month correction. And then, as you say, it depends on where it's broken out, and then it's usually those stocks that get affected most. So when SARS happened, as you just pointed out, the airlines got hit the most, but also restaurants got hit the most. So if you can find, I mean, obviously, personally for me, I wouldn't touch an airline stock now. It's way too late in the game to short things like that. But restaurants, I don't really know. There was one that I was a bit annoyed about because I was actually long and then I didn't really think of going short. So one that I've been long for quite a long time is LK.
Oh, Luckin Coffee?
Which is, yeah, so that's been my nice little one that has for quite a while now. So I got rid of that position a few weeks back. It was just getting too volatile for me and I was just like, I can't handle the amount of volatility. I was like, I'll just take my profits and go home. But as you can see there, that's had a massive effect since the outbreak's been announced. So, I mean, that's been battered. I mean, it went practically parabolic in a way since its earnings date. But yeah, so Luckin Coffee, for people who don't know what it is basically, it's the Starbucks equivalent, but they're solely in China. So they've now got more stores than Starbucks in China. And they came out with some really solid results in the last quarter. But obviously, with this outbreak coming out, I think that's going to definitely dent them, at least until things get resolved. Especially when you're that exposed into one country and you're not in different countries, obviously that's going to have a massive effect on the stock price. So, yeah, I mean, that's come from, 52 must have been the top, more or less, and now it's Where are we at now? So 51.38. It's now at 35. So I mean, it's had a massive drop. I mean, it had to correct itself sometime down the line, but yeah, it's just been crazy. It's been a bit crazy. It has.
So how do
And
you how are you,
the
I just wanted to ask you,
well,
how are you expressing these trades? Are you using options or?
no. So I'm for me, I don't do anything. The only thing I do is literally shares. So I buy or I sell the shares.
Gotcha.
For now, like so I've been doing this. I've been doing well, probably like the main markets now for about a year. So for me, um, yeah, for me, the most important thing is just 1 year as being a noob. Obviously, I've studied quite a lot over the last few years, but I'm just playing it very safe to begin with. Just have a nice little start, and then just learn as I go. Really. So, I mean, you can make more than enough just from long in shares or short in shares as long as you can get the right ones and you know what you're looking for. Yeah, I can't complain. I've had some good wins, and then it's just staying disciplined. I mean, I'm very simple, so I mean, if it goes more than 10% away from whatever I am, if I'm short or long, more than 10%, I'm gone. So, um, so yeah, and then just let your winners run. But I usually go for companies that are smaller caps, like probably like 3 billion esque, 3 to 10 billion more likely, because you'll get more volatility. But then at the same time, there's obviously more upwards than you are with. I mean, you could say that, but then I mean, you look at things like Apple. I mean, Apple's just been crazy. I mean, what? And then obviously this one. I mean, this goes without saying. You can't start a show and not have. Yeah, this is an old one here. I actually went short here and then lost it out. I probably should stop recording my on Trading View. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I mean that's just crazy. This one's a beast from the east.
Yeah,
Who
so
knows what happens to
the
Tesla?
story on Tesla is basically, didn't they have like record short interest down at that 3.25 level or something? And basically
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happened was they beat their sales expectations, and then this thing just started really ramping up. I guess it was more
Mm.
$400, but really here was the bottom before taking off into the beginning of the year, and this is just getting absurd at this point. I mean, that's really crazy, and I'm sure people are just pouring the shorts back on. I just heard more scotch getting poured over there.
Did you actually hear that? No,
Yeah.
that's a good microphone. I didn't realize my microphone was that good.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as like trade ideas and things that I'm playing around with, I mean, it's kind of, you're at a point where things have reacted. You've got a knee-jerk reaction, and the question is, how do you want to position yourself? And for me, I'm waiting for things to come back. Like Tesla, I'm sorry, I'm just not touching that with a 50-foot pole, any kind of pole. I'm just not interested. Starbucks, on the other hand, I think they have exposure in China in addition to Luckin Coffee. But I kind of like this formation that's happening here on Starbucks. We've had this thing kind of initially dump into the kind of third and fourth quarter, really just the third quarter of 2019, rally back up into really just kind of like a resistance level. You can see this area here is realistically where price got back up to in January. I guess this is last week. I mean, this is like the perfect place to be firing off that short. It's like right in this area. You can see
Hang on,
that's
man.
your.
Are you showing your screen?
Oh shit! I'm not. All right, Starbucks.
Right? Oh, Murat. Oh, hang on. Murat said, "Oh, is this why you asked me earlier? Do you buy them on leverage?" Yeah, no, Murat, no leverage. No, and until basically I get more experience. There's cash for the win. No leverage. You're nice and chilled. That's it. Yeah, right. No point. You can make more than enough just using cash. You don't need leverage.
Yeah.
10% year on year. As long as I make more than 10% year on year, I'm happy. Sorry, carry on. My
No,
bad.
no,
I
it's great.
apologize.
Hey, Lomax is here. What's going on, buddy? Another one from the UK group. Anyway, so Starbucks here has got my attention just from a technical standpoint. I like where this has rallied into a fib level. This is generally the area that I look for on a reload to the short and or long side, depending on which side of the fibs you're playing. But for me, this would have been the ideal place. I did not hit this just yet, but I think this has a chance of coming back up into the $89 to $90 range, and that's where I'm going to be looking to at least buy some puts here on this name, because I think their exposure and at least the revenue that they get from China is significant and is going to impact the value of this stock. So we're going to be bouncing in between those levels.
I love this.
Yeah. So I mean, where would I be playing this? I mean, I like options, so I don't have my broker loaded up here, my charts, but we could just use the CBOE here and just take a look at what things would be looking like. And sure, everything's going to be really expensive at this point. But as far as targets are concerned...
No, go ahead. I'll add something afterwards.
Okay. So, I mean, once this thing rallies back up into that $89, $90 range, I'm going to be looking for this to flop back down into, call it the $85 to $80 to $85 range down here, testing the bottom of this kind of bottom that the market put in November. I mean, right now we can price them out, but it's not going to make much sense. And, hopefully people that are tuning in here understand options and the potential risks that you have with playing them. But if you don't, well, you better learn, because I love options. I mean, anyone who trades these things, I don't know how you don't trade them, Jamie. It actually boggles my mind.
The only time I do it is only if I'll basically use it as a hedge against if I'm say long and then I think that there's going to be a pullback, then I'll put on the SPY. But other than that, I don't know, man. I'm just really chilled, to be honest. I'm so much more chilled just having stock and then just that's it. And then more than chilled. I don't need the risk. So gotcha. I keep it nice and chilled, my portfolio.
You gotta play it the way you like.
Yeah, exactly, man. Like for me, I'm more than happy ticking along. But I mean, about Starbucks, I actually had this one. So I had a cross trade with LK. So I was actually shorting this while I was long LK just to have it hedged. So at least then you've got. So basically, with the hedging strategy, it's always good to have one, especially if it's intra-sector, if you think it's going to do better. So I was actually short this while I was long LK to just as a hedge, basically. So, but yeah, I think it's a really good play if you can get it back up and then put a put on it, because not only obviously they're actually not making much of a profit while they're in China. They're taking a lot of, they've opened so many shops, but now that they're getting lots of competition from people like Luckin Coffee, etc., they're trying to basically put promotions because LK do to begin with, they were doing things like buy one coffee, get one free, and they're really good as well for deliveries. So, I mean, from a multiple perspective as well, their multiple is very high, Starbucks. And I think that is because of that possible growth aspect of China. And that's why obviously it's rallied so much. So I think, yeah, I mean, if it gets worse over time of what's going on in China, I think it's not a bad play, Mr. Bear.
There's plenty of them. They're all over the place. And I think just kind of trying to narrow down how you want to play this is going to be prudent, because I think that, as this virus, in my opinion, I think is just getting started. We may have some plateaus in the infection rate, and people may, things may recover in the short term, but you have to remember that you have to ask yourself the question of, what do you think is going to happen here with the market, how this is going to affect people in general, GDP figures. I mean, we've kind of gone over that already, but my personal belief here is this is just going to get worse, and we're going to see a hit to economic productivity. I mean, you're talking in China, they've quarantined, millions of people. I mean, just Wuhan itself, I think, is 7 or 11 million people. I saw people, there's a guy from Australia called Crypto, I forget his name, but this guy's from Australia. He flew into Beijing just to kind of be on the ground and report what's happening there. And there's pictures. Yeah, the guy's nuts. He just decided to go and see what's happening. And there were pictures him yeah, he's live streaming from there. He's going into apartment buildings, and literally there are these apartments that have welded bars across the doors, so people aren't allowed to leave. So if you can imagine that people aren't allowed to go from town to town, there's quarantines in effect. There's definitely going to be a hit to economic productivity, and the question is narrowing down the need. So things like Starbucks I like, and then the most obvious, I'm going to go through the airlines again, and even cruise ships, right? There's this news article about this cruise ship that is currently quarantined with like 7,000 people on it, where there was a couple that was exhibiting signs of the virus and they tested positive for it. This happened in, where is it? I think it was Italy, on this Costa Smeralda thing. There's a bunch of Brits on board. And the scary part is these people have already been let off multiple times in like Marseille in France and a couple of other towns in Italy. And now they're quarantined and not allowed to leave. So I think the biggest risk right now is to cruise ships too, because no one's going to want to get on these things when you've got someone that could potentially start showing symptoms in the middle of one of their cruises. So, I mean, what are the list of cruise ships, right? This is something.
Can you imagine, like, just having a little cough? Just got a little cough on a cruise ship. Everybody just runs to the side of the cruise ship.
I mean, you just have to ask yourself, how crazy is this going to get, and how is travel going to be impacted? And I think that airlines are the first ones. I mean, realistically, I think the U.S. should just completely stop all service to China, which I think that the airlines have come out and basically decreased.
Yeah, but can you imagine?
Oh, it's
if
terrible
that happens, though. That's a huge statement. I mean, BA have done it, so British Airways. They've suspended all their flights.
Yeah,
and it's just a bit like, I think a lot of it though is to do with the media. Like, I mean, because everything's shared so quickly now, and because China, more than importantly, is such a different beast compared to when SARS was going on. I mean, yeah, I think, I don't know, it's really early days and we don't have much information, but companies are just coming out straight away and just going, yeah, just closing this or whatever. I mean, like you said with Starbucks, I mean, they've closed half their stores in China just like that. So, yeah, bit crazy. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, yeah, I'll just be here with my goggles and my mask and just sipping my whiskey.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like going into, I think that a lot of the airlines' revenue is generated by a lot of those flights that run to Asia and to China specifically. So I think their revenues are in trouble for Q1. And if this continues, I mean, just imagine if, you're not allowed to fly, if they just shut down all of the airports. I mean, these airlines, especially the US ones, they're very fragile to earnings. And if there's a downtick in that, they're fucked. I mean, these things could come off pretty seriously. I mean, you can see the last lows in 2016 for a company like Delta's like $33. Do I think it could get all the way down there? I mean, I don't think so, but it definitely has the chance for a pullback. And then if you really go out to a higher time frame, back in 2011 levels would be really crazy. But if we get anywhere close to the $30 or $40 range, I mean, these things are in big trouble. I don't think they can get there, but certainly testing the upper boundary of the $40 mark is within reach, in my opinion. You've got these divergences that are coming in here, some market structure that's starting to form, the preliminary signs of tops, but this is largely traded sideways for a long time, so it's hard to say that it's going to break down. But one of my favorite metrics to use is the Dow versus the Dow transports, just to see how things are behaving health-wise. And I mean, the transports are they're getting rocked here. And some of my favorite ones to look at, things like FedEx and UPS. And, FedEx has kind of fallen out here, and UPS has certainly lost its sideways consolidation. I don't know if I don't think that's a direct consequence of their, this must be earnings. So their earnings must have come out.
I think that's the biggest worry though, isn't it? I mean, the biggest worry is, how are people going to be able to get their Amazon Prime packages?
Hey, if Amazon Prime didn't work, I wouldn't have gotten my masks.
Fair enough. Yeah.
No, I mean,
but yeah, I mean, it's a difficult situation. The main thing, I think, as well, one thing to look out for is, one, knowing when the earnings call is, so whether they've had earnings call or not yet, because I think one thing that will, really, let's say, analysts will punish the stock the most will probably be more. So let's say they come out with their earnings, and then the next quarter, let's say things carry on the way they are, then they have to obviously come out and adjust their forecasts for the financial year. So I think if you can find one that has very high, has a very high forecast for the year, and that's easily going to be more affected because of China, then I think that's probably where you're going to get your biggest drop as well. If you want to just play the earnings event as well, so I think that'll be an interesting one to look at. For me now, I don't really fancy adding or getting rid of more positions. Like I'm hedged 50-50. I'm happy with everything that's going on. So I think for now, I'll wait until I get more decisions and then munch on my popcorn. I mean, I've been buying the last few months. I've been munching on a bit of silver and gold.
That was my next question.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think silver will probably do that run. For me personally, I think. I mean, because I've been munching for the last few months simply because we're 10 years into a cycle. So it's never bad when you're this long into a cycle to have just a little bit of exposure in some commodities. I was actually looking at palladium as well, whether I should just get a couple of % in palladium. I was looking at palladium, and if you've seen the run that palladium has done recently,
crazy.
I honestly couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
that's madness.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's just had an absolute crazy run. But I think you're starting to get companies now just add in a couple of like a couple of % just in palladium, and what's the other one? There's another one as well.
Rhodium went really crazy.
Rhodium, that's it. Rhodium, yeah. So you're starting to get hedge funds now starting to diversify within commodities as well, not just sticking with silver and gold, but also getting a little bit of rhodium and palladium. So I find that quite interesting. So, I mean, if we look at silver and gold is closer to the heights of 2008-9. And then if we look at silver's still got a way to go. So, I mean, I'm 50-50 with both. So I just thought a little bit of exposure there, just in case, you never know. So it's always good to be as diversified as possible.
I think the crazy thing about gold is that it's made all-time highs in every single currency except US dollars. I mean, you're talking euro, Australian dollar, you name it, it's at all-time highs.
Yeah.
So that either means that the dollar is way too strong or gold is getting too strong, right? So it's kind of different.
Yeah. I think the thing is as well is that you had people saying that a lot of people were saying, a lot of investment funds were basically saying that US won't be as strong over the next year, but because everybody was expecting that still for the economy still to be ticking along, everything will be tickety boo. But since this has happened, obviously people now have started to move a little bit of assets into safe havens, which has now put the dollar strong again, when really people were looking for the dollar to actually go down. So I think the dollar has actually strengthened it simply because of what's going on in China. So I think the longer than that goes on in China, the US dollar will stay strong. And then we'll see from there. But obviously, as I said, it's early days. But what are we looking at there?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mechanics going into...
Talk to me.
Yeah, sorry. Am I sharing?
Tell me. Give me ideas.
All right.
Give me everything.
I mean, I think gold is the asset to own. I'm sorry, but I've been spewing this off for a couple years now. Ever since, actually, no, it's ever since the Powell put, the big Jerome Powell pivot last year in January, when he went from, we're going to keep raising rates to, just kidding, we're going to start cutting rates. And then we realized central banks are fucked, right? The Federal Reserve, they have to cater to what's going on in the world, which essentially means easy monetary policy. And I think as long as that continues, you're going to see implications in the gold market that are going to be very, very positive. How this affects the dollar over the long term, I think, is a little less granular. But as far as gold, I mean, I really like it. I've liked it when it, even before the Powell put. And I guess I'm kind of biased because I'm kind of in the gold business itself, but I'm certainly not a gold bug by any means. And, I just think that over the long term, if you don't own gold as part of your portfolio, it's a mistake. I just don't see how this thing gets really squashed as long as the conditions around the world continue in the direction that they're going in terms of civil unrest, people being upset with their governments, monetary policy that's just inflationary. It's just kind of like you got to have a
I
piece of it.
completely agree.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing is as well. I mean, like at the moment we're having obviously everything that's going on, and then I think look, we're at like record highs now when it comes to employment. So there's going to be a time when those record terms of employment, people are going to want higher wages. And I've already started reading that in some of the earnings calls with restaurants saying that it's finding it really difficult to keep good managers because they're given higher wages somewhere else. So there's going to be a time when inflation is going to move. How long that will be, who knows? But I think you're completely right. I mean, it's stupid to not have just a little bit of gold in your portfolio, especially if if you're going to have other currencies, then it only makes sense to have gold in your portfolio as well. Well, what's your thoughts on silver? Tell me
Silver
more.
has been a bit odd. I play the physical and also the SLV ETF. So there was a big trade in December that I missed. Silver seems to seasonally bottom into December each year, and going long in that time frame has always been a slam dunk. But unfortunately, I did not get on board with that trade. You can see I'm not in a weekly trade.
That would have been lovely.
Yeah, you win some, you lose some. But I mean, we kind of rallied up from 15 and a half up to 16 or so, and now we're coming back off. I mean, the long term, I think silver should behave like gold. It's always been its little brother, so to speak. But right now, the gold silver ratio is just kind of nutty. And I think that big money prefers to go into things like gold as opposed to silver, and it's easier to store a kilo bar of gold in terms of dollar amounts than it is a kilo bar of silver. It's much less, and people are not as willing to store kilos and kilos and of silver in their safes. But I mean, long term, I think this should behave similarly. I think it should also continue moving higher. Now, as far as like the down and dirty lower time frames, like, does it make sense to be buying it right here? I mean, I don't think so. I think it can kind of move down in the interim, but you've got some tailwinds in the commodity markets right now, especially or in the gold and silver market when it comes to this global unrest and this unpredictability of the virus. Whenever you have this kind of craziness happening in the world, gold will catch a bid. And that's kind of what we saw over the last week or two. But interestingly, we haven't really broken out with much fervor here on the gold market. And, the other interesting thing about silver is it's not really performing in the same way that gold has. So there's a bit of a disconnect. I think that silver can be bought probably in the 1580 range is where I'd be looking to accumulate some positions here. We're pretty close at we're at 1675. So 1580 is down around where this thing broke out last year. You have to remember that we're entering into February, and seasonally, I typically see these markets start to come off into, the end of March at the earliest and generally into May. And then you start to see them really come off and then look for a more seasonal buying opportunity to play the rise into the summer and early fall. So these trades are generally like months long, and they seem to do quite well. But right now, I'm not playing this because I missed the move and I'm waiting for it to pull back. And I think these markets have gotten extremely hot. Gold, of course, broke out last year in May from, roughly $1,300. Now we're sitting at 1582. So, I mean, do I think that this thing can go all the way back down there and test those levels? I think there have to be a lot of things that change in the world for that to be possible. So, I mean, right now, I'm personally looking for better buying opportunities to come in here. For gold specifically, I like accumulating in the lower parts of the 1500s. Do I think we test all the way back down to this sideways consolidation with double bottom breakout? I don't know, because that's like 1475. And that was the last time people were calling for gold to go back down to 1350. And I think anyone's going to be buying these pullbacks. I think the big money and the savvy investors all realize that gold is the asset to own here. And we're seeing the buying interest come back. I mean, when I first got into the business in 2013, things were just a downward trajectory. I mean, for almost 5 years straight, it was just down, down, and down, and it sucked. Like I was, when I came into this thing, we were already on our way down, but realistically, we're at $1,400, and we continued moving down into 2015, and then just sideways doing nothing. But it's nice to have a change, something change in terms of a market going bullish. So that's been nice for me. But I mean, there's no trade at the moment as far as short-term trades, and we can certainly start talking about shorter time frame trades that I'm going into, and different specific names that I'm trading with options and whatnot. But this first show, I think we're going to try and get our shit together, maybe get a schedule and get nice and organized so we can have a nice show going forward. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking at as far as those markets. I don't know.
Well,
should we talk?
It only seems right to go over to the BTC.
Yeah.
It would only be rude. It would only be right to do it.
Yeah. I think we got to talk crypto.
We've got to talk corn. Corn. What about the corn?
The bit porn.
Oh, hell yeah. Talk to me.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess since we're making this public, we should probably talk quickly about, I don't know, do we need to? I don't want to talk history, like when did you get into Bitcoin? What price did you buy it? Fuck that. Let's just get right into it.
Nah, let's just get into it, man. They don't need to know about our bargains.
Yeah, right. Back when we were buying it in 2013 and before. All right, so what in the hell is going on with Bitcoin? Well, interestingly, I've actually, anyone who remembers where I used to trade, I've since left the craziness of the OKCoin exchange, and I've migrated to Kraken mainly because of legitimacy reasons.
You were using OKCoin. The fact that you were even using OKCoin is like crazy.
It was, right? 'Cause they offered, they were one of the first platforms, aside from BitMEX, to offer 20x leverage back in like 2014.
Ages ago.
Yeah, so I was trading there forever, and I mean, God, I was trading Bitcoin on leverage when it was $100.
You need to change with the times, old man.
Right. So no, it's more like KYC changed, and I was like, all right, if this is going to be legit, I gotta make this all kosher. I can't keep putting this shit through the Chinese exchange. So I have since made everything hunky dory with the feds here.
Oh, Jesus.
So I'm now on Kraken. So I'm going to be using a Kraken chart and also a Coinbase chart, which, by the way, Coinbase sucks when it comes to institutionalizing your account. I don't know what it is with them, but they have the worst support ever. Kraken, they make you sign your life away and basically take naked pictures in your bank, at your bank vault, showing the contents of your safety deposit box, holding up your username and all that other good stuff.
Damn. Really?
Yeah. Well,
wow.
I may have embellished a little bit, but nonetheless, as far as trading, I personally trade mainly Ethereum on Kraken. I have a portfolio of cryptocurrencies in general that include Bitcoin and a bunch of, I call them shalt coins, basically shit coins and altcoins mixed together. And, the shalt coins aren't doing so hot. In fact, they're terrible. A lot of them have come off almost 95% from where I bought them. And that's just a fact of me getting into a market that I didn't really understand. And it just so happened to suck. But I do trade on leverage Ethereum every day. Sometimes I trade Bitcoin and Litecoin on leverage, but it depends on what's going on. So let's get into it. First things first, let's get to Bitcoin and see what's been happening here. I think I've probably transposed this a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so long. I hardly look at crypto these days. It's been a long time. I'll keep an eye sometimes on the BTC chart, but other than my Panda coin, HODL, do you know what I mean?
So you got the Panda coin, huh?
Remember that back in the day?
Oh
Well,
my
what
God.
else? Oh god, there were so many. Oh, back in the day, those were that was the dream when there was only the community was probably less than 5,000 and everybody was friends.
Yeah, that was a
Good
totally
time.
different time.
Uh,
So, I mean, where are we at as far as, our longer or our higher time frame charts? I don't know why I'm using Bitfinex, but I've got this, I'll just talk about this quickly. I cloned price action from, I believe, the last bull run in like 2000, what was it, 15, 16 or whatever, and transposed this over what happened in 2017 and kind of changed the scale so it matched. And it's kind of interesting to see what happened here after the last double top that we saw. This kind of followed along pretty closely up until about this point, but maybe this needs to be moved to like here or whatever it needs to be. But nonetheless, the roadmap here is interesting, right? You can see that probably into June, which I think that corresponds with this halvening, that this could break out of the kind of consolidation to the downside that we've seen in crypto since last year. Things haven't been too hot. A lot of people have dropped out. It's really what I like to see, all the crypto kitties that, when moon, I hate seeing that crap because it's just like, it's not going to happen. I mean, a lot of the space has been washed out and a lot of products have come online that allow big money to get into the space. But I don't think big money wants to see this thing really take off just yet. They probably want to acquire as much as they can, but that's not really useful in a discussion. I trade on technicals here. I think it's really hard to figure out the fundamentals of the Bitcoin price in general. One of the questions to ask that comes to mind right away is, how is this coronavirus going to impact crypto? And I think it's an interesting thought experiment, try to understand that a lot of the miners are in China. I think the majority of the network hash rate is in China. I think that's changed a bit over the years, but nonetheless, I think there is still a majority of that network in China. And if things are shut down there, how does that work in terms of scalability, in terms of, if the electricity goes out from shit really going crazy there? How does that affect the ability to process these transactions? How does it affect the entire network? And, it's supposed to be distributed across the world, and that's supposed to be its strong point here. But we could potentially see that network tested here in the long term if the virus gets really bad. So, I mean, right now it seems to be functioning as a safe haven. People are buying crypto up in case things go really crazy. Jamie and I were talking before the show that maybe people in China are putting their money into Bitcoin so that they can leave the country. That would make a lot of sense too. I think historically speaking, we've seen a lot of correlations between the Chinese yuan and the price of Bitcoin.
to be fair, man, it'll be interesting to look at local Bitcoins, right? Like the liquidity going through there. See how that's gone on over the past few weeks. But I think as well, watch the difficulty as well and see if that adjusts. Like if we get those negative adjustabilities over time, where are we at? Oh, I can't remember. Do you remember the site? It wasn't. It's not on there. It's like on a Dutch site, isn't it?
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for the volume of depending on the country.
Let's see.
Let's have a look. Volume by country. Here we go. Yeah, CoinDance.
Okay.
My internet is so bad, man.
Yeah, your UK
gosh.
internet's not working. Is it bugged? Does it have a virus? Maybe.
Get off the call, Dad.
Yeah, that was a bad one. I gotta start practicing.
Oh my god. Where are we at? Where's China?
China.
Oh, there we are. No, okay. So at the moment, it seems that the volume's actually it's so it seems like nobody's using it at the moment. I think that'll be a really interesting one to look at. Oh, hang on, where are we up to here? Yeah, so literally hardly any volume. over the past month.
Murat's saying that Turkey has a bunch of volume. You want to scroll down there and take a look?
Of course, sir. I'd love to.
I wonder if that's really kind of
Turkey would be to do with the currency, though, wouldn't it? The currencies and obviously the stability of the country at the moment. It's not
there's a lot of civil
they have really bad inflationary price. Yeah, their inflationary problems were crazy. I think their interest rates just went through the roof. Where am I at? Are we there yet?
Yeah, there's a lot of capital controls, and crypto is the perfect instrument for them.
Thailand, United Arab Emirates. That'll be an interesting one to watch. USA, man. It just looks like, to be honest, it's just that seeing people are just not as interested. Vietnam, Venezuela. I mean, that's always an interesting one to look at.
Yeah, that one I would expect.
I mean, that is crazy. I mean, I've actually looked at the Venezuela story for quite a while now. Is they still got really bad problems over there then? I mean, this would tell me yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're having serious inflationary issues, and there's constant civil unrest there, and people...
Such a shame.
There's a lot of oppression. It's really a terrible situation going on over there, and people are using cryptocurrency to insulate themselves from the currency inflation. I mean, you can't really do anything with your money there. It's like 1 minute your $20 might be good enough to buy you a loaf of bread, and then the next minute it's like not enough to even get a gumball.
Oh, did I just get a message saying that the WHO have actually made it an international emergency now? Let's have a look. I just got a quick notification. What are we saying? Yeah, so it's been declared a public health emergency.
Okay, so that gives...
So what we're saying on the markets, what have the market said? This is what I've found quite interesting, whether this has actually been priced in or not. I presume it has already been priced in. Where we're looking.
I'm looking at the SPY on the daily. What are you looking at? Crypto?
Nah, I don't look at crypto. That's old school. Old school fun.
I mean, it's funny because right now this hourly candle on the S&P is rallying.
Yeah, I know, right? Love it. They just...
I mean, is that really going to change anything? I don't know what kind of power. I think the CDC has to declare it like an emergency or something in order for them to get emergency funding from the government, and all of a sudden they get like $75 million or something allocated to them for, quarantine and testing and research or whatever they need to actually get the amount of money they need to protect the country against this thing. But I think that news should at least force some countries around the world to continue banning travel to and from China. I know Russia closed off their border. North Korea, funny enough, like yesterday or 2 days ago, maybe it was a week ago, they're just like, nope, we closed our border too. This is just going to continue to get worse, I think. So
we'll see. But can we at least try and end it on a high note?
Yeah, sorry. Let's finish on crypto and try
drink.
Drink.
Yeah, just have some whiskey. Have a look at some GIFs, some memes. Watch the some old school crypto videos. There's some great songs out now of crypto songs. There's this one person coming out with some bangers. I'll find them. You carry on.
All right. In terms of Bitcoin, I'm not a big fan of where we're at right now in terms of price. I think that things are very bizarre when it comes to this market specifically. And, everyone's kind of hanging their hat in an optimistic sense on the halvening coming up for Bitcoin. And, everyone thinks the price is going to continue to go up because obviously there's going to be less coins issued per block and the scarcity is going to start to increase and yada, yada, yada reasons. I don't believe in that as a driver of price to continue moving higher. I think that the majority of people who are already invested in Bitcoin or who have thought about investing in Bitcoin are already well aware of the impacts on the price. And I actually think it's being priced in now. Do we get back to test these all-time highs? I think it's not outside of the realm of possibility, but I do think that it's very low likelihood. I think we've got maybe a couple more $1,000 to the upside. You can see that, just from the last sideways consolidation that we had and broke to the downside, this is going to be some pretty serious resistance going forward. I mean, everything in this area is projecting the price. I mean, this almost looks like it could be a cup formation. We got to put in a handle and then maybe we can move higher, or if we even take this on a weekly time frame, right, we could maybe see something like an inverse head and shoulders trying to form, but I don't put much stock into that just yet. I'm not, completely sold on this thing rocketing to the moon right away. I think it's great range trading. I think there's some fantastic setups that have come into this market. As far as short-term targets, I really like price continuing up into, look how funny that corresponding to 61.8 and $11,000. That could potentially be a target here. But I guess the question is going to be, where do we see this price going in the next week? If you're a short-term trader like I am, how am I trading this market? So I got to go down to a 4-hour and below. Right now, we've kind of broken out a little bit. So things are definitely getting overbought. There's this custom indicator here that I like to use. I can't take credit for building, but nonetheless, it is showing us in the overbought area for a number of trading days now since the 28th. And when you have this indicator into this area up here, I really don't like to be a buyer of for a long-term trade, at least on the 4-hour. So the 4-hour is getting a bit long in the tooth as far as potential upside to continue into this market. I think we kind of will stall out in this 9,600 range, so maybe another couple $150. But nonetheless, there was volume coming in. There's nice buying coming into the market, and where this thing could eventually stop out, I think, is imminent. Maybe. So let's go down to the hourly and see what this thing looks like here. Again, I kind of like this area, maybe up into the $10,000 if this thing really wants to get going, firing off shorts. I'm not long Bitcoin by any means, so whatever I'm saying is meaningless because I don't have any skin in the game as far as a short-term trade. I am long-term long Bitcoin.
Long-term hodl. It's
right.
The only way. Why mess around with
me.
small time frames? You can just chill, have some popcorn, and watch it go up over time.
Yeah. So it's tough to really put levels down and hold my hands to the fire or my feet to the fire here. But I am trading Ethereum, which is going to closely follow Bitcoin as well. I had a couple of short trades that I was working on Ethereum over the last couple of days, one of which failed initially here on the hourly. I kind of went short, I think, into this area here. I got stopped out into the overnight. And then yesterday, I saw price was kind of topping out into the early morning session. We couldn't really get above where we had been over the previous day session. So I took a short, and it ended up working out into, I guess, the end of the day yesterday, and didn't quite get, I like to use Fibonacci retracement levels. 38.2 is generally first stop target. I've noticed on Kraken, the levels don't perfectly line up. So generally I'm giving myself plus or minus $1 when it comes to these targets. So I ended up getting closed out at 171 on my short. And when I woke up this morning, I could have sworn I thought this thing was going to continue moving lower because on the 4-hour, we had a nice bearish divergence working that was actually confirmed into this sell-off. But, we put in a reversal pretty quickly. And into this morning session, we continued moving higher. I actually fired off a long on this candle here. Once we broke to new highs and got thrown back down, at first it looked like it might be a fake out that we could just inevitably dump to the downside. But I went long from 177.5 after we made these new highs at 180. I just set the bid and set my stop down at, I think it was like 175-ish, or maybe it was a little lower than that, but nonetheless, it didn't get triggered. So it must have been below 174. And we continued moving higher. So I'm still holding this long from, let me see where I am at. I gotta load this thing. Well, you know, it doesn't matter. I'm long from that area, and potential targets are the same as where I would draw them on Bitcoin. So I like using this tool here on TradingView with this fib extension. I'm looking for 185 to 189. I know on Bitcoin, I was looking for the 50% level for this thing to fizzle out. I should probably start taking partial profits. You know, as we go into the end of the week here, I could see this thing losing steam. But, you know, this thing is still showing strength. So it's interesting to see on these lower time frames that we are getting overbought on multiple time frames. So we got to go and see the hourly's getting overbought, the 4 hours getting overbought. What is the daily looking like? And the daily's starting to get overbought as well. But, you know, there's no signs of reversal on the higher time frames just yet. And those fib extensions can be used to kind of show us potential targets. And, you know, 38.2 on Ethereum from this higher, from the range going all the way up to 363 is at 210. We're sitting at 181. So if this thing wants to continue moving higher to 210, that's when I could initially see a real pullback coming into this market. If we fizzle out before that level, then, you know, it is what it is. But you can see OBV, you know, volume coming in here, putting in nice bottoms. It just looks like the kind of market that's getting frothy and people are still buying into it, but I'm just not seeing the signs of a pullback just yet. Sure, you know, the 4 hour here is kind of worrisome as far as things like divergences building. Maybe a double divergence could be coming into this market. And then we pull back into the weekend and then set ourselves up for next week. I like to trade Tuesday, Wednesday. I generally see the markets set themselves up, long or short, going over the next couple of days. You can see that things kind of set themselves up last week. We've been moving higher. So I'll be looking for pullbacks to get long. I think I tweeted out, you know, earlier in the week that I was looking for pullbacks into 165 to 169. And we kind of got that pullback into 169, but, you know, it didn't get all the way down there to go long. So things are looking like they're going according to a loose outline of what I would like to see these markets do to the upside. So again, I'm really looking at this point 185 to 189 for this to fizzle. So transcribe that same thing to Bitcoin, and I guess we can kind of abolish that 50% level and really look for that $10,000 big fat round number idea for this thing to get into. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. I don't know if it's helpful. I mean, it's just what I'm doing, and you know, that could be a great idea or it could be a terrible idea, and we don't know until I get and hit my target. So I'm using, again, this Kraken actually has 5x leverage, which is like preschool time compared to OKX at 20x, but nonetheless, it seems to be what I've been using here and works out kind of nicely. So I'm going to stop rambling here and kind of ask you, what are your thoughts on all this?
Honestly, man, I don't follow anything crypto related. I mean, the only thing I actually follow is the BTC price. Alts have obviously just gone crazy down. So, I mean, I don't bother looking at alts or anything. So literally the only thing I look at is the BTC price. And yeah, okay, I have some BTC, you know, tucked under the mattress of my Trezor. But other than that, man, that's it. For me, it's too volatile, especially from a short-term perspective. So for me, it doesn't make any sense at all to like trade it for short-term, only because the way I'm more investing rather than trading. So yeah, like I just have my Trezor on my ledger and chill. It's the only way.
Gotcha.
Especially when you've been through a bull run and a bear cycle. It just takes too many years off you. So, you know, sometimes you just gotta sit there and let the young ones take the hit.
Let them jump on the grenade.
Let the kids learn.
Yeah, I
So,
mean
yeah,
this sector used to be so volatile. The
Oh,
swings
man.
in price was just like, I mean, you could make 500% on a day trading on
Yeah, I should
leverage. I mean,
remember.
it was awesome. And now you'll have weeks at a time of just sideways, and you just get eaten up by fees. So your timing in this market has to be really, really good. I just moved my
Yeah, I don't
fibs here
bother.
on Ethereum to the last kind of cycle high here, and I'm using 239 just on a lower time frame, and it seems to be correlating a bit with this 192 to 195 range as an absolute high here in the shorter term on a 4-hour move. Once we hit that level, I would be playing to the short side, but nonetheless, waiting for signs to fire off a short after I close out this long. I'm going to set my first target at 185. It's funny because I entered this trade, and usually I mark down in a spreadsheet all of my levels, and I'm like scrambling to figure out how to get a stream started and what we're going to be talking about. And right now we're using this thing called StreamYard, and I was playing around with a couple of different things like Streamlabs, and point being, I didn't get a chance to really put in my levels here, so I'm kind of talking them out loud here. So I'm going to take my first half of my position off the table at 185 and try to sell the rest at around 189 to 192, and I'm going to have a moving stop to lock in any kind of profit at around 180 and change, just because if we do pull back into that level, I don't want to be holding it anymore. Just because of what I'm seeing on the internals. They just seem like they're getting closer to the end rather than the beginning of a move. So that's what I'm doing there. And that's the extent of the crypto trading that I'm doing, other than some short-term, holding of like Atom. I bought that a while ago, and that thing pumped on
Adam,
Coinbase.
how's Eve getting on?
Eve's a little neglected. She hasn't really. Is there an Eve coin?
Eve is never neglected.
You're right. Eve is never yeah, I don't see an Eve coin, but whatever.
I feel like we need to wrap this up before I say something out of control. These whiskies have just hit me, man.
They've hit you? Yeah, I'm stumbling around. I guess I'm a little rusty when it comes to doing these shows, but I definitely want to do this again. I miss doing it. And hopefully,
it's always good. Just a nice little informal chat and just keeping up to date with things that are going on. I think it's always good to do it this way, because then there's no filter. It's got to be like this. It's just whatever comes out of our mouths happens.
Yeah, very off the cuff today. Not much.
Yeah,
not
definitely.
much structure. So I apologize.
It was literally a message of, so what are we talking about today? NCOV, stocks, crypto. Yep, sounds good.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Yeah. So if you made it through this whole podcast and you listened to us the entire time, thank you. And we definitely look forward to making this more polished, more professional, and better going forward. So thanks for sticking with us.
With 20% rather than 40%, just so I sound a little bit better.
Yeah, but then you'd be drinking that like sugar shit. It wouldn't be real whiskey if it was only 20%.
Man, you're right. If that ever happens with whiskey, like they've done to gin, I'll jump off my apartment building. It's just not worth living, is it?
They made gin 20%. That's gross.
No. But they just add flavors left, right, and center that it doesn't actually taste like gin.
Yeah, that's weird. I like my liquors to be pure.
Exactly, man. Right, shall we finish off with the song? I don't know if this is going to play because my internet's so bad.
Yeah, what's going on over there? Why is you
it's working.
Okay. So I don't hear anything. Yeah, I don't hear anything. And it seems like your microphone kind of cut out too. Nope. Got nothing there, bud. All right, well, we seem to have lost
Can you hear
stream. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear anything?
Yes.
Can you hear the music?
Yeah, it's kind of muffled.
Cause they're oversold. I'm gonna. I can't no more. I got my own thing for the boy. So yeah, that just happened. But yeah.
Awesome. I love it.
Oh dear. Sorry.
All good, buddy.
So-
So when should we expect to do this next?
It's up to you, man. I don't mind doing it in a couple of weeks. Should we do it? Let's have a look. I can't. I can do Thursday the 13th if you can do Thursday the 13th.
Yeah, that should work. You don't want to do something next week?
I can't next week. I'm out with the family.
Oh, okay, no problem. All right, so
See.
let's plan for the 13th and go from there, and maybe.
Well,
Figure out.
should we polish it? Figure out how to make it. I suppose. Yeah. We'll have it more structured next time.
Yeah, do we want to do it on Thursdays, or should we move to Fridays, or what?
It's up to you, man. I don't mind doing something on Fridays instead. I could probably actually, if you're looking at Fridays, I could actually do next Friday, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah. Next Friday, I'm around. Yeah. Let's do it. If you're around, let me know, and I'm happy to make it work.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, man. Sorted.
Cool. All right. You have. I think we should end the broadcast. So let's sign off. And
Oh, is it not finished?
no, sorry, I left it on.
Hope you all had fun. Sorry, I didn't realize it was on. All right.
Jamie's like half in the bag already. We better get off the air before he fucks up. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We look forward to catching up with you again soon. And it's really good to be back. And I hope our next couple shows are more polished than this one. But nonetheless, it's just kind of ripping the Band-Aid off and getting started again is all we needed.
It's good to catch up.
All right. Bye, everyone. Until next time.
Boys.
All right. I ended